What's up, guys? I actually literally just got home from the final day of the 3-day weekend for the World Endurance Championship at Circuit of the Americas for the Lone Star Le Mans, as they call it, or the 6 hours of COTA. It was a lot of fun. Ferrari ended up taking the win. It was a very fun race. First World Endurance Championship race I've ever been to. First endurance race I've ever been to, if we're really getting, really down into the nitty gritty. That said, that's not what we're here for, although it was very exciting, and I'm going to choose this opportunity to brag a little bit. Best piece of thing we got here, Iron Dame's hat signed by all of the drivers. They had a pretty torrid day. They got some contact with a Corvette down into turn 15, and unfortunately that basically was their race done and over with, but still a very much a win, and I'm taking this one to the record books because that is a very fun piece of merch. But that said, that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about the Italian Grand Prix that just happened today, and we're going to talk about it. Now, like I said, I literally just walk in. I did zero prep for this, and so we are going to roll into this, one take it, and we are going to move on and get ready for a nice week off before we get to Baku in Azerbaijan. That said, we're here to talk about the Italian Grand Prix, and if you haven't already, subscribe down below if you enjoy F1 or sim racing content. We do both here on this channel. We're going to talk about our race quick hits, our weekend winners and losers, and then we'll wrap things out with our predictions, results from the predictions me and my community made before the week began. But let's go ahead, let's kick things off with our quick hits, and boy, they're going to be quick because we're rolling right on into it. Like I said, we are one taking this. I don't care if I mess up speech, we are rolling and rocking. That said, where else can you start besides Ferrari and Charles Leclerc rolling the dice on a one stop here in Monza? I think that it was really most shocking to a lot of people that all of a sudden that you never would have expected Ferrari to pull out the one stop. I mean, they pit Charles, I think, on lap 16 of the 53 in the Italian Grand Prix, and I think it wasn't until right at the end with about 15 to 18 laps left. I think it was when McLaren did their second stops where everyone kind of looked up and went, wait a second, the Ferraris haven't pit yet? And at this point, should they? I think McLaren really left a lot to be desired. We're going to talk about them here in a minute, but we have not yet talked enough about Charles Leclerc, who absolutely made a one-stop work into the delight of the Tifosi, who, man, what an atmosphere for that podium, am I right? Looks absolutely incredible. Would definitely love to, take that one off the bucket list at some point. But nonetheless, Charles Leclerc wins the Italian Grand Prix, gets his second win on the year after his win in Monaco. And I tell you this, if you were going to ask him at the end of the year if he only got 2 wins, which would he pick? It would probably be these two. So congratulations, Charles. Definitely a big moment for you guys. Definitely a big head scratcher for a lot of other teams. And let's go ahead, let's move on to that other team being McLaren. Lando Norris starting on pole, a front row lockout for the Papaya team with Oscar Piastri starting P2 in this one. Oscar did end up leading at the end of lap 1 due to an unbelievable move around the outside of the second chicane there at the beginning of the race. I think if it was anyone else but Lando, I don't know if that move sticks. But it was a spectacular move, and it had me bouncing in my seat from the moment it happened. It was incredible. Now, obviously, that move also allowed Charles Leclerc to move past Lando, dropping him down to P3, which I think really set the table for Charles to be in the battle for basically the rest of the race. But it was a very odd situation with McLaren, with Red Bull also not having the best weekend, probably their worst weekend in a very long time. It just left a lot to be desired. We've heard a lot about papaya rules, whatever that means. Ultimately, it ends up meaning that Lando ended up only finishing in P3, with Oscar finishing on the second step of the podium, with Max nowhere to be found in the top 3, finishing, I believe, down in P6. And so an opportunity for Lando to put in more work against him in the fight for the World Drivers' Championship. Nevertheless, McLaren fans are going to leave scratching their heads and probably more angry than anything at a double podium for the team. And honestly, I kind of understand it. I do not understand what McLaren's doing right now. Are they fighting for the Drivers' Championship, or are they more focused on the Constructors' Championship? At the same time, I don't think they could have done anything about Ferrari, transitioning into a surprise one stop and just being able to hold off to the end. That said, if they were serious about fighting for a driver's championship, they really should have flipped Oscar and Lando. And I know that they probably are trying their best to not be a team that, let their drivers race and, finish where they would, yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, it left a lot of question marks and probably a lot more questions than answers at the end of this one. Red Bull, we kind of already touched on. We don't have to go into it too much. They had a pretty torrid weekend. Red Bull very quickly falling back into the clutches of the midfield, or the upper midfield, lower Formula A, as we'll call it, as they really have just not looked the same team they were at the beginning of the year. And they bring it home with a P6 and a P8 finish, which might have been some of the best results they could have had this week. I don't think they did themselves any favors with the strategy. They ultimately did commit to the two-stop pretty early, going from a hard first stint to a hard second stint, before obviously being forced to pit once again for a medium stint at the end. Yeah, Red Bull just, I don't know what's going on over there, but I mean, I'm here for it. I've been begging for someone else to take it from Red Bull, and so it's just, but at the same time, it's just very odd. I don't quite understand it. You have even Max Verstappen pretty audibly frustrated with the team right now, and so we'll see what happens with that. But I don't know. Let's see what else happened. We saw Alex Albon points finishing in P9 thanks to a 10-second time penalty for Kevin Magnussen. We're going to touch on that in a minute. Kevin Magnussen, we'll touch on this part now, finishing in the points for Haas. Let's go team, finishing with a single point at the race weekend. Nico Hülkenberg did not get very lucky at the beginning of the race. Ultimately, basically, lap one essentially ended his race, was squeezed out by Daniel Ricciardo, who also managed to get a penalty from that move, and effectively Nico's day was done from there. But Kevin pushes it into the points just barely, thanks to a 10-second time penalty that he accrued in this one, which I guess we'll move on and talk about it now. Kevin Magnussen officially on 12 out of 12 penalty points and will miss the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, presumably in Ollie Behrman jumping in to replace him. Obviously, I don't believe at this point there's been any confirmations of that, but I have no reason to suspect it would be anybody else. I mean, he's literally contracted to drive there next year. So Kevin is going to be taking a nice 1-week vacation. Ollie Behrman's going to get a bit preview of what the Haas car is going to potentially feel like going into next season. He'll get some seat time, which I'll appreciate as a Haas fan. Oh, let's see. Aston Martin did not finish in the points. Stake was also nowhere to be found. RB looked okay. Yuki ended up having to retire from this one thanks to the contact with Nico Hülkenberg, which is one of the other penalties that Nico got. Daniel ended up driving a pretty solid race, ultimately finishing in 13th, I believe. Oh, what else? Oh, we'll talk about Franco Colapinto finishing P12 in this one, opposite Alex Albon, who finished P9. So a very solid day for Williams, but at the same time, it is Williams at Monza. So I'm gonna have the restraint enough to not make grand generalizations from that. We've seen Williams perform very well at Monza in the past. But let's see, I believe that basically wraps up our quick hits. Any other highlights? I believe Lando now is 62 points off of Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship with 8 races to go. It's going to get interesting. We'll be fascinated to see what McLaren does in Baku. I have no reason to believe that McLaren also won't be the best car there. So we'll see if McLaren can sort themselves out or continue the clown show. So I think that basically wraps it up there for quick hits. Now, let me take a brief pause, because I've been talking for a few minutes, to just kidding. We're going to keep going. I said we're doing this in one take, and we are going to do it in one take. No stop, no breaks, no nothing. We are rolling into our weekend winner, and we are going to spend no time on it because it's Charles Leclerc. Ferrari threw absolutely everything at winning this race, and they managed to pull it off on a crazy, crazy one-stop strategy out of nowhere. Held off Oscar Piastri at the end and did just enough to finish on the top step of the podium at their home race. They brought, I think, 9 upgrades to this race. So I think after Monaco, and became very clear that they weren't necessarily fighting for the drivers or constructors championship, they threw every single resource they had at winning Monaco, and they managed to pull it off. A very, very fun day. Add on the fact that Ferrari also won the 6 hours of COTA with the AF Corsa crew, the 83 car, and Robert Kubica. It was a very, very good day. Robert Schwartzman put in a mega stint at the end, holding off Kamui Kobayashi in the Toyota GR car. Man, that was a fun finish too. But yeah, it's going to be Charles Leclerc. I'm going to tack on Ferrari at the end, because what a day for Ferrari, winning your home race. I think that means more to them than almost anything else outside of a championship. But even then, it still might mean more. So congratulations, Charles and Ferrari, my weekend winner. Moving on very quickly to my weekend loser. I'm going to go with Lando Norris, primarily not just because of the another failed pole position to leading lap one conversion, not only just not gaining the maximum points to over Max Verstappen in this one, and definitely has more to do with it, which is whatever is going on with McLaren is negatively impacting him, and you can tell. I've never heard a guy sound so depressed after getting a podium, and I mean, I understand he failed to convert a pole to a win, he failed to convert a pole to leading at the end of lap one, but at the same time, I think he and Oscar Piastri now are just so frustrated and confused about what's going on, and the team from Woking and the MCL and the Papaya Army and all that stuff. But it's like, we're all confused, so I can only imagine what he's feeling. And so I guess this one is also more of a hybrid loser now that I'm saying it out loud. It is definitely Lando Norris, who feels like he's probably fighting for the championship, and McLaren, who doesn't seem like they feel like they're fighting for the championship. It seems like they're more focused on the Constructors' Championship, which at this point I think they're like 8 points behind, 4 points behind, whatever it is, single digit points behind Red Bull. And so I think if they don't win the Constructors at this point, it's a massive failure on their part anyway. And so it's just, the confusion is rolling out of me as I'm saying this out loud. But we'll just leave it at that, right? We'll just leave it at that. I think we all understand how frustrating it probably is as a McLaren fan. I can only imagine what it's like for Lando and Oscar at the same time. I saw a clip of them in the post-race interview where, man, the vibes were so down, considering they just finished a double podium. I get Oscar being upset because he basically ran a very, very well-run race. Definitely looked the better part of the quicker driver in this one, and just lost out on a win to a surprise call from Ferrari. I get that. But just the vibes are so bad right now. The vibes at McLaren are negative, and they got to get it figured out, or I don't even know what. They're squandering the best car on the grid, and it's not looking good for them, bro. All right, moving on to predictions results. This one, I think, is actually a very good weekend for the community. And as always, before we jump into it, if you're interested in jumping into our little predictions championship, even though we are coming down to the end of the season, you can head to the Discord link down below. Leading up to every weekend, I'll make a call for predictions, and you'll be included if you do it before my predictions video comes out. You'll be included in my predictions video, and I'll add you to our leaderboard where we accrue points based on our predictions and if we get them right or get them wrong. Quickly running through my predictions, will start with biggest positive surprise. I went for Nico Hülkenberg. I thought Haas was going to perform very well around Monza, and we saw Nico into Q3. He ended up qualifying 10th in this one. Ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, had some moments on the first lap that basically ruined his race. Turns out I picked the wrong Haas driver, as Kevin Magnussen did end up finishing in the points. Unfortunately, Nico finished down the order, and tough day for Nico on that one. So unfortunately, no points for me on that one. Moving on to my pick for biggest disappointment, I went for Aston Martin. I felt like it was just the vibes were off for Aston around Monza, and I was right. No Q3 appearance and no points leaving Monza. Aston Martin finds themselves in no man's land, kind of. They're kind of above Formula B, but not really anywhere close to Formula A. It's like they're in Formula 8.5, and I don't really know what to make of them right now, but Stroll had a pretty tough day. Alonso gave it a good go, but ultimately just outside the points, and so I gave myself a point for this one. Moving on to my pick for qualifying, I'm going to take a look at my notes so I don't forget the order that I actually predicted. I predicted a Lando Norris pole position. That's a singular point. I predicted a Max Verstappen P2. Obviously did not happen. And a Charles Leclerc P3. And now while Charles did end up being in P3 at the beginning of the race, did not qualify P3. So unfortunately I'm 1 for 3 there. But I did nail Lando Norris taking pole, so I will take 1 on that one. Moving on to my race podium, I had a Lando Norris win. Obviously, he did not do that. I had a Max Verstappen P2. Obviously, did not do that. And a Charles Leclerc P3. 2 out of the 3 drivers I picked to be on the podium were correct, but they were in the wrong spot. Half point for each, leading up to a single point gain for race podium. And that leaves us only with our one crazy prediction where I predicted that Franco Colapinto would finish outside of the bottom 5. And so basically I predicted he would finish P15 or better, being a rookie jumping into the car basically 3 days before the weekend started. I just had good vibes. It is a Williams around Monza, definitely taking a bit of this one, but a rookie jumping in on short notice, you would understand if they weren't quite up to speed. P12 for the lad, so definite point for me there. And if we take a look at the points, I gained 4 points this weekend. Very solid weekend, but unfortunately, everyone had a solid weekend. So if we take a look at our updated points standings, I currently sit on 57 points, still 2 points behind Sentinel 40 with 59. British get a very good weekend, the best weekend out of all of us, getting 5.5 points, now on 54.5, closing the gap just a little bit. F1 on Inferno with 34, and Andrew bringing up the rear, still on 31 points. That said, what happens next? F1 heads to Azerbaijan and the race around the streets of Baku. One of the more interesting races. I do think this one has grown on me a lot as a fan. I wasn't sure about it in the beginning, but it's definitely grown on me a lot here. I think is going to lead to some very interesting results. We have some drivers here who perform very well, some cars who should perform very, very well, and it's going to lead to some fun action. I think last year we saw a Perez win, a Max Verstappen P2, and a Charles Leclerc P3. But that leaves one question here. Who are we going to see on the podium this year? Let me know your predictions down below, as well as leave me your race rating for the Italian Grand Prix. Guys, that is going to wrap it up for me here in this one. This has been a one-take race recap. It got very rambly. I had a lot of fun with it, though. I think I got a lot more organic thoughts out. Let me know what you thought of this version, the style of race recap down in the comment section below as well. That's going to wrap it up for me here in this one, guys. We'll be back before you know it for another round of predictions and race recaps around Baku and Azerbaijan. But until then, I appreciate you making this far into the video. If you did, leave a like rating. It really helps me out. And turn on notifications so you don't miss a single upload. That's going to wrap it up for me here, guys. And I'll see you in the next one.